Welcome to the Nonfiction Insights channel. Today, we're diving deep into William Green's Richer, Wiser, Happier, How the World's Greatest Investors Win in Markets and Life.
Where should we start?
Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, it's really striking how many different paths these investors took. But they often ended up converging on some remarkably similar core truths.
Yeah, that's true. Green really hit on something, calling them practical philosophers, didn't he?
He did. They weren't just like number crunchers staring at spreadsheets all day. Yeah. They were drawing on this really deep understanding of the world, of human nature to navigate all the market craziness.
Right. And one of probably the first things that jumps out is this constant focus on thinking long term and having just a huge amount of patience.
Oh, definitely. Patience is key.
Like Pabrai, for instance. He was just completely floored by Buffett's track record. What was it, 31% annual return?
Yeah, over something like 44 years. Insane.
Insane. And he did the math, realizing that just $1, over that time could grow into, well, something like $144,000.
That's the power of compounding right there.
It sounds so simple, but actually doing it?
Well, that's the hard part. The psychological side is huge. We sort of get compounding intellectually.
Sure.
But the urge to chase quick wins or, panic when the market dips, that's incredibly strong.
Mm.
So cultivating that patience, that ability to just ignore the day-to-day noise and keep your eye on the long horizon, that's a real skill.
And Bogle kind of offered an easier path there, didn't he?
Yeah, Jack Bogle's point was, look, for most people, you don't need to be a stock-picking genius. Just consistently investing in low-cost index funds, letting that compounding work its magic over decades,
Yeah.
that's a profoundly effective strategy.
Less stressful, too, probably.
Way less stressful.
But then, okay, you see someone like Bill Runt, and he went like the complete opposite way.
Right. Talk about concentrate.
He made these incredibly focused bets, like putting, 35% of his fund into Berkshire Hathaway.
Yeah, right during the dot-com bust, when everyone else was running scared from anything that wasn't tech.
That seems risky. Definitely not diversification. What's the thinking there?
Well, it shows that understanding risk and reward is very personal,
Mm-hmm.
and it can lead to different but still successful strategies.
Yeah.
Ruane's conviction in Berkshire, it came from incredibly deep research, just knowing that company inside and out.
So it wasn't just a guess?
Oh, absolutely not. It was a belief in its long-term value, its management. But yeah, concentrated bets like that, they can offer huge returns.
But also huge risk if you're wrong.
Exactly. It really highlights that while the long-term view is crucial, how you get there can vary a lot based on, your own research, your risk tolerance.
Makes sense. And both Bogle and Templeton seem to agree that a big advantage is just going against the crowd, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Seeing opportunity when others are paralyzed by fear or caught up in what Templeton called crowd madness.
Yeah, that idea of going against the grain, that leads right into the next point, thinking differently, independently.
Mm-hmm.
Green really paints them as these intellectual mavericks, not afraid to hold a contrarian view. You mentioned practical philosophers, drawing insights from everywhere.
Yeah, and that's such a key point. It wasn't just finance books. They were pulling ideas from history, psychology, science.
How does knowing about, say, psychology help you pick stocks?
Well, think about it. Understanding cognitive biases, the predictable ways our brains mess up, helps you avoid those same traps in your own decisions.
Ah, okay. Like confirmation bias or something.
Exactly. Or herd behavior. History gives you perspective on market cycles, how people react in crises. It's about building this broad mental toolkit.
Like Ed Thorpe, right. He wasn't just investing. Casinos, cryptography.
Right. He tackled problems people thought were unsolvable.
Yeah.
And his core approach was always question assumptions, demand proof, check the evidence, as he put it. Don't just accept conventional wisdom.
Okay, but then you've got Mohnish Pabrai, who openly says he just shamelessly copies Buffett and Munger. That sounds like the opposite of independent thinking.
Yeah, it sounds like it, but it's smarter than it looks. Pabrai's cloning isn't blind imitation. It's about deeply, deeply understanding the principles behind why Buffett and Munger were successful.
So understanding the why, not just the what's.
Precisely. He learned the rules of the game they played, fundamental analysis, value investing, and then played by those rules with incredible discipline, even when the market was doing something else entirely.
And he adopted those core Graham ideas that Buffett learned.
Yep. Viewing a stock as a piece of a real business, not just a blip on a screen. Understanding that the market in the short term is like a voting machine. driven by emotions, popularity.
But long term, it's a weighing machine,
Yes.
reflecting true value.
Exactly. So Pabrai mastered those foundational concepts and just applied them ruthlessly. It wasn't about inventing something new, but about executing proven ideas exceptionally well. His returns kind of speak for themselves there.
Yeah, beating the S&P by that much.
Yeah.
Wow. And he wasn't afraid to look outside the U.S. either, was he? Following Munger's advice to fish where the fish are?
Right. No geographical constraints if the value is there. His big bet on Seritage during the COVID panic is a perfect example.
When everyone thought retail was dead.
Pretty much. But he saw undervalued assets based on his analysis, while others were just reacting to the fear.
Yeah.
That takes independent thinking, even if the framework was cloned.
Okay, this seems to bring up another huge theme. Character. Self-discipline. Buffett and Munger talk about that inner scorecard.
Ah, yes. Judging yourself by your own standards, not by what the world thinks.
How does that actually help you make better investment choices? Seems a bit philosophical.
It is philosophical, but it's incredibly practical in investing. That inner scorecard acts like an anchor. If you're focused on your own principles like integrity, thorough research, long-term value, you're less likely to get swept up in market fads or panic because of headlines.
Right. You're not trying to impress anyone short term.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Pabrai and Spear took this even further with that, let's say, blunt attitude of, well, not caring what the world thinks.
Yeah, the fuck what the world thinks line.
Sure.
Pretty direct.
Very direct. But the point is conviction. Sticking to your analysis, even when it's unpopular. They point to figures like Gandhi or Mandela people driven by an internal compass, despite huge external pressure.
So in investing, it means sticking with your research, even if the stock price goes down for a while.
If the fundamental reasons for owning it haven't changed, yes. That takes real discipline.
Templeton seems like the poster child for that kind of self-reliance, working his way through Yale during the Great Depression.
An incredible story.
And then making that unbelievable bet at the start of World War II.
Yep.
Buying like every stock under $1.
Maximum pessimism, right? Buying when there's blood in the streets. It takes unbelievable self-belief, discipline, and, frankly, guts.
Yeah. He really just focused on controlling what he could control, didn't he? His research, his emotions.
And Pabrai learned that from Munger, too. Take a simple idea and take it seriously. Identify sound principles and just apply them consistently, even when it's hard.
Okay, so we've got long-term thinking, independence, character. But investing is never certain, is it? There's always risk.
Always. And that's where someone like Howard Marks comes in. This big thing is that everything changes. Understanding cycles is critical.
He also said something really counterintuitive. Everything that's important in investing is counterintuitive, and everything that's obvious is wrong. What's that about?
It's a challenge, really, to dig deeper than the surface narrative. Marx argues that once an investment idea becomes obvious and everyone's piling in,
The easy money has already been made.
pretty much, and the risks probably higher than people realize. His firm, Oaktree, kind of embodies this. They get cautious when things are bubbly.
And then aggressive when there's fear, like 2008.
Exactly. They were buying distressed debt when others were forced sellers. That focus on building unfragile portfolios, avoiding too much debt, gave them the power to act.
Being resilient, like Jean-Marie Avillard warning against depending on the kindness of strangers.
Right. You don't want to be in a position where you have to sell at the worst possible time because you need the money or your lenders are calling.
Which is why Buffett keeps that mountain of cash at Berkshire, I guess.
Precisely. It's financial strength, it's optionality, it's security. It lets you survive downturns and even take advantage of them.
And Nick's sleeps partner, Quais Thakaria. No, wait, wrong connection. Arnold Vandenberg. No, Tom McLennan. Sorry. McLennan talked about risk pricing going in cycles, too.
Yes, McLennan, his point is crucial. Sometimes the market just isn't paying you enough to take on risk. When risk seems cheap or non-existent, that's when you need to be most cautious. He compared it to living on a fault line. The danger is invisible until it strikes.
So his focus is on risk mitigation, winning by not losing.
Exactly. Protecting your capital is paramount, especially when others are getting reckless. It's not always about hitting home runs. Sometimes just avoiding strikeouts is the winning strategy.
It feels like a lot of these successful investors also really value simplicity, keeping things focused.
Definitely. Think Occam's razor, the simplest explanation is often best. Even Einstein believed in simple ways to describe complex things.
And Joel Greenblatt's magic formula seems like a prime example in investing.
Absolutely. From his little book that beats the market, the strategy was so simple. Buy good companies at bargain prices. That's it.
But the results were amazing, weren't they? The back-tested returns?
Remarkably impressive.
Yeah.
It just goes to show you don't always need super complex algorithms or financial models.
Correct.
A straightforward, logical approach, applied consistently, can work incredibly well.
And then you have Nick Sleep and Kai Zakaria at Nomad. Their guiding principle was quality, inspired by Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance.
Yeah, kind of an unusual inspiration for a hedge fund, right?
Yeah.
But it worked for them. They focused intensely on maximizing returns over the long haul, not just gathering assets under management.
And they made some really contrarian bets based on that quality focus, like Zimbabwe or Amazon early on.
It's exactly. Bets that probably made their clients pretty nervous at times, but they had conviction in the underlying quality and the long-term potential.
Sticking with it even when it's uncomfortable.
That's the discipline again. And Zakaria apparently still held a huge chunk of Amazon in retirement. That tells you something about their belief.
And they had an ethical angle too, right? Liking companies like Costco.
Yeah, they admired businesses that focused on creating sustainable long-term value for everyone. Customers, employees, shareholders. Like Costco, sharing its cost savings with customers, building loyalty. It's a simple, principled approach.
They also practice that art of subtraction.
Right, focusing deeply on just a few things that really matter and deliberately ignoring all the noise, all the distractions in the market. Like Garrett's, Ruane, and Guy Spare also did. Less is more.
Okay, which brings us maybe to the flip side. Not just doing smart things, but actively avoiding dumb things. Avoiding stupidity.
Yeah, Charlie Munger's territory. His whole focus on reducing foolish thinking.
Using inversion, right? Think
Right.
about how to fail, and then just don't do those things.
Exactly. Instead of asking, how can I succeed? Ask, how could I ruin this? And then rigorously avoid those paths. It's surprisingly powerful.
And some people make it really practical, like Tilling Hast listing stuff he just avoids.
Yeah, like saying, I just don't invest in biotech because he knows he might get emotional or doesn't have the deep expertise. It's about knowing your limits and setting up guardrails.
Munger's warnings are pretty blunt, too. Avoid drugs, liquor, and leverage.
Simple rules, but they target things that massively impair judgment. Leverage especially can wipe you out even if your underlying ideas are good.
And partnering with honorable people, that seems crucial, too.
Hugely. Aligning incentives, working with people you trust, and it avoids so many potential headaches and disasters.
Munger also talks about psychological pitfalls, doesn't he? Like the mind's automatic shut-off device.
Yeah, our tendency to grab onto the first explanation and stop looking, or our bias towards information that confirms what we already believe.
Confirmation bias again. How do these blind spots actually hurt investors?
Oh, in countless ways. That excessive self-regard tendency, thinking you're smarter than you are, leads to taking dumb risks.
Mm-hmm.
Over-optimism tendency makes you ignore potential downsides. And then there's simple, pain-avoiding psychological denial, refusing to admit you made a mistake and cut your losses.
Ouch! Recognizing those sounds like the first step.
Absolutely critical. Just being aware that your brain will try to trick you is huge.
So how do the greats fight back against these biases? You mentioned challenging your own beliefs.
Constantly. Like Darwin, who supposedly made a special effort to write down evidence that contradicted his theories, Buffett and Munger do the same.
Actively look for reasons why you might be wrong.
Yes. Bill Nygren has that devil's advocate review, where someone on the team is assigned to poke holes in an investment case. It forces you to confront weaknesses.
And Schumanstein's advice. Internalize Munger's list.
Yeah, really learn those cognitive errors. And just as importantly, take care of yourself physically and mentally. Being tired, stressed, or unwell makes you much more susceptible to emotional biased decisions. Maintaining equilibrium is key.
Okay, wow. We've covered a lot of ground from richer, wiser, happier. Thinking about the main takeaways for listeners. I mean, we should probably say the level of focus these guys had, it's intense. Maybe not for everyone.
That's a really important point. Yeah, the single-minded dedication of a Buffett or a Munger might not be sustainable or even desirable for most people juggling careers, families, other interests.
Right.
But the principles underneath, those are incredibly valuable, I think, for almost anyone.
Like what specifically?
Well, cultivating that long-term perspective in your finances, for sure. Practicing independent, critical thinking, not just in investing, but everywhere. Developing self-discipline, understanding risk, embracing simplicity, and crucially, working to avoid those common mental errors.
So these aren't just investing tips, they're kind of life skills.
Absolutely. They're broadly applicable to making better decisions and hopefully leading a more fulfilling, less stressful life, whether you're managing billions or just your own savings account.
Right. So maybe for you listening, the idea isn't to become the next Warren Buffett overnight.
Probably not realistic.
Yeah, maybe pick one or two ideas from this that really, clicked with you.
Yeah. Something that resonates, and then think, okay, how could I start incorporating that into my own life? Even small, consistent steps based on these ideas can make a big difference over time.
Makes sense.
And maybe that leads to a final thought to leave you with.
Yeah.
As you think about this wisdom, this pursuit of financial success and, well, wisdom itself,
Mm-hmm.
how do you balance that with all the other things that make life rich? Relationships, health, experiences, just enjoying the journey.
That's a big question, something to definitely mull over.
It's not just about the destination, right?
We hope this deep dive into richer, wiser, happier has given you some valuable insights and definitely some food for thought. Remember, the journey to becoming richer, wiser, and happier is, well, it's a continuous one. Please subscribe to the Nonfiction Insights channel for more explorations of impactful books and ideas.